All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I am your host, Damon Pistolka. And with me today, I am excited because we have Eric Sarver from the Sarver Law Firm, and we're going to be talking about employment law challenges for growing businesses. We're going to be talking a bit about some of the remote work challenges. Eric, thanks for being here today.
Damon, always a pleasure. Great to be back. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Yes. You're a repeat offender, and we like to have you back, man. It's always good. It's always good to catch up on the employment law, and you're out there in New York doing it though, and in it every day. So let's, like we always do, you've been here before, but let's catch people up that may not have heard. Let's hear about your background and kind of how you got into being an employment lawyer and doing what you're doing today.
Yeah, sure thing, Damon. Well, again, good to be a repeat offender. Good to be back on the show. And for those that don't know me, a little of my background story. Best is just a very quick, where I'm from, right? So I grew up in Long Island, New York, Valley Stream to be precise, and always had that interest in being a lawyer. I can remember being like 11, 12, 13, watching TV shows about it, watching LA Law with my dad as a teenager. And I just really enjoyed the storylines, the drama. So I went to college upstate in Binghamton, went to Hofstra Law School, and got really into like what it really means to be an attorney. So what I did was I worked at a couple of small firms out of law school for about 2.5 years, and decided I wanted to try it on my own. So I opened my law firm, which was formerly known as the Law Office of Eric M. Sarver, and now it's Sarver Law Firm, PLC. And basically what I do, Damon, is, I channel some of that interest in people, which I've always had, into helping them solve their employment and business law problems. So I do, for example, like employment litigation. I help, businesses to defend against lawsuits in court or arbitration, or help them with compliance or writing employee handbooks. And then lastly, I do business law. I do a lot of, your buy-sells, your contracts, business formation. Really, I'd say it's in the business of just solving employers' problems and business owners' problems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. And you said you wanted to be a lawyer from a young age. So I've got to ask a couple questions about that.
Please, let me have it.
What was the hardest thing about becoming a lawyer that you didn't expect?
Oh, that's a great question. Let's see. Well, I would probably say like learning the business side of becoming a lawyer when I went out on my own. When I went out on my own, it was 2001. It was a long time ago. I was a lot younger. I looked a lot younger, and I knew the law. I knew what I learned in law school, and I knew how to think analytically and, strategically for my clients, but didn't know all the business that was involved, the strategy, the marketing, the networking, which I've come to love as much as the practice itself. But I remember a quick funny story. One of my very first clients I had, I just started my practice. I was about 2 months into it, and I had worked at places where you got a paycheck on Friday. So they hired me to do a bunch of work. It was a law firm, actually. I did the work for them and gave them the motion, what they wanted, the research and everything else, and gave an invoice. They said, great, we'll submit it net 30. And I said, great, wonderful. What does net 30 mean? Back in like way back. Yeah. So, did a little inquiry and, oh, wow, I'm getting paid in 30 days, So a lot to learn about that. But, once you learn it, like I wouldn't trade it for anything. I would not trade this hat or these many hats to be more of a mechanic, like to go into a place and do in-house counsel work. It's not anything wrong with it. Just not, I love this business part.
Yeah. It's just not, it's not for you. It's not for you. And that's cool. So second question.
Okay.
You wanted to be a lawyer from a young age.
Yep.
What is so much different from what you saw on TV that you just go, they were fooling me?
This came up. My wife and I were watching a TV show the other night, and this came up. Well, the biggest thing that I'd say is different when I was younger, because don't forget, I do trial, I do mediation, I go to court, arbitrations, defending employers now from, anything from breach of employment contract to wage and hour issues to overtime. What's different, Damon, is just how long things take, how long cases take to progress through the courts. On TV shows, right? If they get a case, they meet the people, they're in trial next week,
Yeah.
and that's one thing that's different. And then the second thing I think that's very different is that, like, don't get me wrong, it's exciting and it's interesting and it gets my adrenaline pumping, but the courtroom scenes, with everyone shouting at each other, the sort of I want the truth, you can handle the truth, Tom
Yeah.
men scenes, it just doesn't usually go down like that way. It's just more of a calm, just back and forth, and it's just, and sometimes it gets tense, but it's not that high drama. You know what I mean? It's like a doctor who is an ER doctor who watches like ER or Grey's Anatomy and says, "This is nice, interesting, but this is not what it's really like." That would be the big difference. I'd say that's the big difference.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I had to ask when you said you wanted to be a lawyer since you were younger, because I know that TV portrays it a lot differently than it is to make the story seem more interesting and stuff. But
yeah,
so we talked a year ago, something like that. I should have looked at the date, but I didn't. But a lot of things have changed. A lot of things have changed, and we're sitting here today with let's just start. We got a few more people that are working remote. And remote could be not down the street. It could be in a lot of times in another state, another country.
Yeah.
Sometimes for people. So there's some challenges there. Other thing, just reading something about the FTC and if I read it right, and non-competes.
Yep.
Or something like that.
Yep.
So we got a lot of stuff to talk about here.
We do, you have a few hours. I guess you got some dinner in the background there to chop on while we're.
Well, it is. It's because
yeah.
So, and then not to mention transparency, wage transparency laws. So I'm going to start. I'm going to ask you a general question because that might help us.
Okay.
What is your most common call now? Call to action. What is someone calls you? You get 10 calls. What's the most common question you're getting today?
Without a doubt, it's how to follow all the different paid sick leave and paid leave laws based on having remote workers. Clients have a business in New York, but now they're hiring remotely because they're growing, they're expanding, and they can do remote work. So they're hiring folks from, Missouri and Florida and California, right? So they're asking me which laws apply around maternity leave or paid sick leave or FMLA and state versions of that. So I'm getting a lot of questions these days, Damon, on compliance issues, right? And like you mentioned, the second one that's really big is salary transparency laws, right? If you're a company in, let's say in Florida, and you're hiring a remote worker in Colorado and you're advertising there, you have to list the minimum and maximum, the reasonable salary range for that position, whether it's external or internal related positions. So basically, I'd say short answer is a lot of calls around compliance. How do we follow all these new federal and state and city laws governing how we do business?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Because my follow-up questions are going to be around those things. But I wanted to see. So
yeah.
First of all, let's talk about salary transparency laws.
Yes.
What is I think I know, but what is the origination? Why did people want salary transparency laws?
I do. It's a great question. Yeah. So, the original, right, the motivation, the policy argument behind it is a pretty noble one. They want, states where governments were concerned about pay inequities, right? That, companies like say, we're paying people who look like us, right? Like a white male more. And this is, a true problem in society, right? And employers and employees paying more to men and not paying equitably for women, for people of color, for women of color. So they wanted to put an end to that. They thought if we can force companies to disclose how much they're paying, it'll give the people who work there a chance to see, hey, wait a second, they're paying, this much job and this new person, and I've been here 12 years and I'm an African-American woman and I'm making this little. So it was a way to help to root out discrimination. That was the origins of these laws.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And, and for me, honestly,
yeah,
I don't think I've ever worked at a place that paid men and women differently. It was position. I think I thought bad about this a lot.
Yeah.
And my wife has experience in larger companies, and it was prevalent in some of them and not in others. And I just think I think if that helps, it's a good thing because hey, a job is a job. It doesn't matter who's doing it. It's
Mm-hmm.
if the
Mm-hmm.
job is getting done, they should get
Mm-hmm.
paid. You
Yeah,
know?
equal pay, right?
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
So now you make a good point. I'm in I'm in Washington State.
Mm-hmm.
I hire somebody that I'm trying to hire somebody in Colorado, like you said, or I don't even know if Colorado's got a transparency law,
They do.
wage trans. So
Yeah.
then if I'm trying to hire there, do I have to follow their laws in my posting there because even if I'm a Washington business hiring somebody in that state, or how does that work?
It's a great question, right? So the states look to where the employees are who either are doing the job or could potentially do the job, right? So
Okay.
you can be a Washington-based company, right, or even a Florida-based with 10,000, let's say, Floridians working for you here in Florida, and if you're posting a job, let's say, that could be filled in Colorado, or you're posting, let's say, on like boards or that get a Coloradian can see, right?
Yeah.
You've got to disclose in that state what the minimum maximum salary is, right? It's kind of mind blowing, but if you've got, say like whether you're putting it on a job board that is listed in that state, or maybe you're listing like in an advertisement, let's say in an online publication or advertisement, you
Yeah.
list, yeah. So it's like they look to where two places. Where is the company doing business? If you're doing business in a state that has salary transparency laws in place, you've got to follow it. But if
Yeah.
you're in another state, but you're hiring from that state where they have salary transparency laws, the state you hire in, you've got to follow the rule. You've got to stay where the salaries are.
That's really interesting because what you said, and I'm going to see if I understood that right.
Yeah.
So I'm in a state that doesn't have a transparency law. I don't even know about Washington State, but I'm not for sure.
Right.
But if I'm saying I can take candidates nationwide,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't specify the state where I'm going to be hiring somebody, does that mean that I have to comply? I might as well comply with the wage transparency law because I'm supposed to if someone from Colorado sees that ad?
Well, it's interesting. If you're very vague, or rather not vague, but broad in terms of nationwide, right? But you're not targeting that one state,
Yeah.
you might be able to argue, right? Or can argue that you don't have to follow that because you're putting it where other people, like in the general ether, so to speak, of the.
Yeah.
But if you're targeting, let's say, people who work in that state, in New York, or let's say it's a job that's going to be done remotely in Colorado, right? Let's say it's a job where then you have to list it. I always say to my clients these days, Damon, like err on the side of caution.
Yeah.
Right? Because what is the cost to list the job? Right, to state an extra line that says that is this, right? What is the actual cost, and what do you risk if you run afoul of these laws? Like we employment lawyers, are still actually discerning some of the changes in these rules. We're getting a sense of which states have them, like you mentioned, Rhode Island, Colorado, New York. Washington State, I believe, does have it. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
But like also just what do you look to? So you look to again, where is the employee? Where is the job being done, or can it be done, remotely? A lot of companies will try to surpass the salary transparency law by saying, okay, we're hiring, but we're not going to have an office in the state. Don't come into the state. But if you're doing business and to say the person who's working from home lives in the state where the salary transparency law is, you have to list the minimum maximum salary. So I think the pushback, I'll say, though, like from the other side, from the employers, is that some were unclear. A lot of companies, some might not give the best salary up front, but they have other good perks. They have a great work-life balance. They have great, let's say, hours. And so they want to wait until the interview, right, to tell the person, like, look, we offer, $85,000 a year. Let's say a salary that maybe in this industry, people get an average of 110, 120. But we give summer Fridays, you can see your kids, it's a life balance, great benefits. So they want to be able to get people in the door to sell them on the job. And some of the concerns they have, I think, are that, if it's just like people scrolling through job listings and they just see the salary, right, they scroll on, they click on. And so that's I'm hearing different sides of it. But, to your point, what do you have to lose if you're not sure if a state's salary transparency law applies? List the salary. As I tell my my clients, right, if they're unsure. If you're not sure, which state's rules apply about, say, notice, for example, like notification of certain rights to remote workers. A lot of states make you have an electronic poster, right, that you send to,
Mm-hmm.
if you're not sure what your state requires, well, send the poster, send the,
Mm-hmm.
they sell these electronic versions, PDF versions.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about posters that have all the different employees' rights and obligations and rights listed on them, workers'
Yeah.
compensation, wage overtime, and the like.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's great to know because I think that, like you said, it can be it's a good thing in some respects because then we all know what it is. But it would be challenging for someone that does really offer a different kind of work atmosphere and work life balance that may pay a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
It could,
Mm-hmm.
because you think about even the difference between a private sector job and a government sector job. The
Mm-hmm.
government sector job may not pay as much, but they got a nice retirement, they got benefits or whatever the heck else that makes it worthwhile, and it would make it difficult because of specifically what you said. We're
Mm-hmm.
so trained now by Amazon and everything else to roll down the screen
Uh-huh.
and find the lowest price or the best price, or the highest in that.
And some might even,
Tough.
some people might even set their, search terms for a position with a minimum salary, and so they're going to roll right past those. So the company has their work cut out for them then to really advertise and promote what else they offer, like in the job posting, perhaps, to make that point.
Yeah, for sure. So, wow. And with the amount of remote work that's going on now compared to 5 or 6 years ago, it's because it was a little bit, but not anything like it is now. What are some of and we'll talk about paid and unpaid, but what are some of the real consequences if somebody screws up on this wage transparency? Has anybody got fined for it? Anybody, have you heard of any of that kind of stuff? What's it really?
Yeah, so each state has their own like fines and penalties involved. Like for how many, let's say, for each job posted, right? And once they get caught, let's say they have a chance to cure. Most states will, Damon, will give the employer like one shot to fix it, right? To remedy the problem. Say, hey, you didn't post this; it's required. So they'll give them an opportunity to say, okay, we're going to go back. We're going to amend that that job posting and list the salary. But the penalties, they could be like, a few $500, for the first one, or $1,000, but then they grow as the employer continues. A couple companies I know got dinged with a warning because they put like, minimum salary, like 10,000, maximum salary 400,000. So it's not an actual realistic range. They said, well, the lowest paid person in our company gets 10,000 as a part-time income, and the highest paid person gets 400,000. So that's a reasonable range. So the law is a little more specific, like, almost like a common sense definition of reasonable. But that was an example of some companies getting dinged. I think it was either Google or Uber. A lot of big companies, they are arrogant. They don't want to be, beholden to these laws, So I would say there are penalties, though, to keep in mind. So, so employers should take it seriously. And then there are just so many other issues that come up within a hybrid workforce, like even the day-to-day logistics of like, workplace equipment and home equipment and workers' compensation rules that apply. I could talk a little bit about that if you'd like, unless you.
Yeah, it is, because I actually had somebody that does a lot of workplace safety, ergonomic work that was talking about this years ago about how it was going to change with remote work. So go ahead.
Sure. Well, first off, like I think one thing that comes up for me that I see a lot is companies with work with remote workers now, and one of the things they say is we're going to save money on commercial office space. Now that's true. No more office together.
Yeah.
They say we'll save money on say transportation for some of our employees and reimbursement. That's true if it's travel within the course of the job. And they say, and we'll save money on workers' compensation. I say, well, wait a second, hold on, right? Because if you have employees, right, in the states, the way the state law is, you have to have workers' compensation insurance. Now, remote workers, like if they're independent contractors, don't have to cover them, right? Or if they're owners in a company and they're working like an LLC and they're members and each giving work. But when you have employees who are remote, here's the thing: if you are requiring, right, mandating them to work remotely from home, you're basically setting up a de facto office for them. So you do have to have workers' compensation coverage, and companies have to realize that they can and will be, charged. They might be subject to a workers' compensation claim for someone who gets hurt at home, and it becomes very tricky because like somebody falls, twists their ankle on the job, slips on a banana peel, by their cubicle desk. It's very clear cut injury happened on the job.
Yeah.
Whether they were on, their lunch break or not, or someone else, let's say, who does a more manual job, is, say at the stove, like, cutting, chopping in the restaurant, and they burn themselves, they cut their finger. That's an on-the-job course of duties. But what happens, like we had a case recently in New York where, it was a case went to the appellate court where somebody ordered an ergonomic chair. Funny you mentioned ergonomics, and it came in the mail, Amazon package, great. And they were carrying it up the stairs from their basement, door entrance to their home up to their home office, tripped, fell on the stairs and broke their ankle, got serious and broke some bones and injured. So, the company fought it and said, wait a second, you were carrying a chair up the stairs. You weren't doing any of our work for us when you got hurt. You were, but it was during working hours, and it was in furtherance of the course of his duties. Like, the company didn't come and install, an ergonomic chair, and he didn't want to work from his couch. So the courts kind of held that, first it was denied the claim, then it was appealed, then it went back and forth. I'll spare you all the details.
Yeah.
The appellate version was remand it back to workers' comp and say, no, you've got to, give this person a workers' compensation claim coverage. So we have stories like that, people on a lunch break, and then they go up to answer their phone, and they trip and fall on their carpet, but they're talking to a customer, Is that covered by workers' comp? Is it the course of duties? They want a break, but then the phone rang, it was a client, so they went to answer it. So we see a lot of issues about in the changing workforce. Like, it's so different. We're on a screen, we're zooming in and out. 5 years ago, a lot of people didn't know what Zoom was. And now it's like second nature. But workers' comp is a big issue, and so is like office equipment. What happens if you send your employee a laptop, company issued laptop, and you fire them? I mean, if you fire someone and they're working in your office on Madison Avenue, they usually leave everything in the office, right?
Yeah.
But if you mailed it to them in, let's say Alabama, and you're in New York, and you're saying, please mail this back to us, a lot of workers say, no, I'm not going to do that. I just got a free laptop. Let them come after me. And there are ways to protect that I can get into. There are different ways I advise companies what to do, what the law allows.
Yeah, that's cool, because that's a huge problem I know with a lot of people, because you're sending off $1,000 worth of equipment to a remote employee, and if they don't work out, what do you do then?
And the answer to that question varies from state to state. Some states say that you're allowed, as an employer, as a company, to deduct it from the last paycheck, as long as that doesn't leave them with a net that's lower than the minimum wage, right?
Yeah.
So if they work 40 hours, for you, and they're an hourly worker, and you deducted $1,000 from their paycheck for the laptop, and left with $1,100 or $150 left, or $200 left, that's going to be a problem. But if you deduct something that still keeps the minimum wage, some states allow it. Some states say you can deduct. Some states say no, you can't deduct from the last paycheck. You can have a deposit up front that you deduct from, or you can sue them in civil court. And a lot of companies say, well, am I going to go to Florida civil court, just where this person lives, And I say, for your contract, state that you can sue them in in the state you're in, or make sure you have a deposit up front if you're allowed to do that. So look at your state law, and talk to your employment. I mean, it's like the job is not to know and memorize every state's laws, because it'd be mind-boggling.
Yeah.
But it's like, like, I hear an issue. Like, you're an employer, you're a business owner, you've got remote workers, you're monitoring their social media use. What do you need to know? You're giving them equipment, and is that okay? What do you need to know? And it's like, that's where I come in. I help with the compliance, and I defend from lawsuits that happen.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. Because that's office equipment is huge, and like you said, just getting it back if something didn't work out. So the other thing you mentioned, which I love that we're going to get it talked about a little bit, is paid and unpaid leave, or sick leave, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Now, let's talk about that a little bit, and how that's kind of changed the game and what we're doing.
Sure. Well, the federal government has this clear unpaid FMLA. It's 30 years old now. The FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act, right? Up to 12 weeks, like unpaid leave. Your job is protected. It can't be fired from when you return. You have to be offered the same job or a comparable position if there's a legitimate business reason not to give it to you. But that's for companies of a certain size, certain number of employees who work a certain number of hours, 50 or more, 1,250 hours in the year, etc. But a lot of states have paid family leave acts, right? Basically to say that if you need time off to care for a loved one, usually it's a close family member, it's a spouse, a partner. Now we're seeing, a child, God forbid, a parent, a brother or sister, and you need to care for them for a serious illness, or in some states to protect them from domestic violence and stalking issues, right? They need your support. Then, which I think is a good idea.
Yeah.
Right, you get paid leave to take care of them, and so some states say 2/3 of your salary paid leave for 12 weeks. Some states give 8 weeks. Some states give 60% paid, but a lot of states some states are giving full paid leave, for that. So look to New Jersey and New York, and so people are taking paid leave on two bases. One basis is to care for a loved one who's sick. That's kind of like the equivalent of the FMLA. The other is to care for themselves when they get sick, and that's kind of like the short-term and long-term disability laws of different states. So, when you're in a remote workforce, a lot of my clients ask me, well, Eric, which company, or rather which state's laws apply to my company? And it has to do with, where the employee lives, where they reside, how often they live in that state. I've had clients, like a story where a client had an employee in Florida, and the employee moved to New Jersey and mentioned it to HR, but then HR didn't mention anybody else. So, the person in charge didn't know that this person was now living in New Jersey. So they went to take off, and the person said, okay, I know Florida law. You don't get any maternity leave because, they don't have to pay for it. But because they live in New Jersey now, they had to mark for that 12 weeks leave. So there are laws around, pregnancy and paternity, and they're expanding in the people they cover and how much is paid. So, they need to know all about those laws, right? Sick pay, leave, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point, because those kind of, you just think of that change right there that you talked about. I'm not considering that in that person's wage or accruing for it on the back end, whatever you're supposed to be doing accounting wise for that.
Right.
And then they come out, and all of a sudden I've got to pay 8 or 12 weeks, whatever their state law is, leave now that I wasn't planning on, that I didn't think I had to.
Right, Damon. And keep in mind that, for a larger company, that might not be a big deal, but if you're not a Walmart or, a restaurant chain franchise, then you're a small. I have a client that has, 6 employees. So, they're covered by New York State by various laws around paid leave. And, this very pregnancy issue, maternity issue came up where, now that the person was living in New Jersey, she had to pay them. And so what am I going to do? She was barely making ends meet with her business was slow, but you have to pay it. Now, most employers, though, do get insurance, right, to pay for people's paid leave and paid time off, so that insurance will pay for disability, paid leave. So it's important, I think, if you're a business owner, to look into that insurance, talk to your insurance broker, and including EPLI insurance, which is employer professional liability insurance, right? That if you're going to get sued, you to call me up and say, Eric, this person wrote a demand letter from their attorneys. They're claiming that we discriminated against them. We swear we didn't. We fired them for this reason, but they happen to be subject to this situation. They drew to conclusions. We're being sued in court. What do we do? And, it can cost, as we know, a trial can cost 6 figures, right, in legal fees.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, easy.
Even just going through the settlement can cost tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
A lot of companies are faced with this dilemma of even if they say, Eric, I know this person was not being truthful, or I know that there was something here, but they got a new job, 2 weeks later, paying more money. And in terms of emotional stress, they're claiming, $800,000, and I just don't see it, right? I see a social media feed, I don't see them, refraining from their day-to-day activities. What do we do here? And sometimes they say, it's going to cost us more to litigate than to pay the person. So if you have employment liability insurance, it pays attorney's fees, it pays costs, and you could actually really choose more wisely if you want to fight a matter or not that you feel is just not accurate or right.
Yeah, I'm writing that down. Employment liability insurance. That's something that Yeah, that's a wise investment for people that have a lot of employees, that's for sure.
It is. And I talked to one thing about my colleagues, Aaron Levine, he's in the insurance industry. He talks about this,
Yeah,
the importance of it because, like all insurance, if you never really think you're going to need it, you think, oh, I'm really good to my employees and we all get along well and we're a family business here and we've never had
yeah,
a problem before. But, sometimes you're lucky and you're right, but it's like all insurance, you get home insurance, you get flood and fire insurance, you get car insurance because if you do get into a car accident, you want to be protected. You
yeah,
know, I like to think, Damon, of my compliance work as a type of insurance policy in and of itself. It's not actual insurance. You're not signing on the line and paying
yeah,
insurance premiums to me. But when you pay me to do compliance, I am helping to assess, pardon me, where your risks are for liability, and then we'll plug up those holes. We'll make sure you're following the Department of Labor laws and regulations, and you're posting your internships correctly, and you're following the law, and you're learning how to communicate with your employees when they have complaints and do investigations properly, and that can really reduce the chances of a lawsuit or a
yeah.
penalty fine.
Oh yeah, it takes your chances down significantly.
Mm-hmm.
That's for sure.
Yeah, it really
So
does.
we had one other thing that you'd brought up when we were talking before was
Mm-hmm.
non-competes,
Oh yeah,
non-competes. So been some changes in non-competes.
lots.
First of all, let's explain the landscape of non-competes right now.
Yeah. I would say that like going the way of the dodo bird, they're kind of on the way to extinction, to be honest with
Oh,
you.
really? Yeah.
You know what it is? Like, so you've got the non-competes being attacked from three areas, right? From the legislature, a lot of states now are passing laws, either
Yeah.
completely banning non-competes. New York has a bill that passes on, the governor's desk, waiting to see if she signs it, that will ban non-competes going forward, including like not even having business exceptions for partners and so forth, or high-end executives. Other states have a partial ban. They say, look, if you're, a salaried executive making like this much money per year in salary and this type of position, then you can be held to a non-compete, right? Not economic duress. But if you're making $50,000 a year as a low-level employee and you can't compete for 6 months and you get fired, I see the point. Like you're kind of, you're really stuck. You can't work, can't feed your family if you only is technology sales, and you're banned from working in technology sales. So there are laws in the state that are cracking down. And number one, number two, a lot of government regulatory agencies and government agencies are weighing in on this topic. So you mentioned the FTC; they're challenging it as unfair restriction on trade and fair trade practices, right? You also got issues of this violate the Commerce Clause. You've got the National Labor Relations Board, NLRB. Their council recently issued a ruling decision saying, hey, we think this actually violates the National Labor Relations Act. Why? Because if employees are, afraid that if they get fired, they'll be bound to a non-compete, they can't work elsewhere, they're going to be too fearful to speak up about unfair labor practices and violations of labor law and safety issues because, they're afraid, like, if I get fired, I can't work anywhere else for a year. So it's an interesting interpretation. So you got and then the third thing you've got are the courts striking them down. The court saying, when I first started practicing, I did a non-compete case in 2000, a company trying to enforce it. And I never forget, it was a 3-year non-compete for like a certain geographic area, because it was the year 2000. So yeah, more like, 100-mile radius. People drove around to sell items. It was less like, let's get on Zoom, right? So, and I remember all the case law talking about a 2.5 year restriction rate and how that changed over the years to 12 months, to 18 months, 12 months, to if it's more than 6 months, it won't be enforced. But, I think what's coming up is that a lot of people, a lot of companies need to look at those state laws because, as we pointed out earlier, you're a growing business, you're growing, you're hiring more people, hiring more executives, and maybe you're hiring in a state where non-competes are banned. You hire someone in California, look at your employment agreement. If you're using an old template, Damon, from 2020 and has a non-compete clause, you might as well just cross it out because it's null and void. So they're really, but the good news is there are other ways that I help my clients to protect their, from the competition. They say, Eric, what do I do? How do I, stop the chief of marketing from taking the secret sauce and going to the competition? And there are ways to protect like proprietary information and trade secrets. So I I rewrite a lot of those employment contracts and agreements and offer letters to further protect the company from those type of, unlawful, or not unlawful rather, but let's say there's those competing employees that are going to go to the competition and try and take trade secrets with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because, like you said, it's coming from three different sides now.
Mm-hmm. Courts.
And
Sure. Oh, yeah.
yeah, and the non-competes, you can see why some of them are why they're important in some cases, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm the brains behind something and I leave and it's a key piece of technology or something,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to another, I mean, it kind of stinks if you couldn't protect that, but you can protect the technology itself, I guess, and then at least you're protected against what's current. But
Right.
and then you hear horror stories too about, I know someone personally that they were in one of those non-competes that was more like where you're talking about, where it should have been an exception, right?
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in knowing about non-competes in Washington State, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And here it's pretty much been drilled into my head that if you had a non-compete, you might as well pay them through the term of the non-compete, because it's not going to get enforced if you don't do that. Right. And that's how we got around it all the time, is we just said, listen, if we're going to pay you like you're working, but that's non-compete.
There's no economic rest then. You're not suffering. You're getting paid as if you didn't come, without even coming to work, right? Exactly.
Yep. And that's just the price we paid for doing them. But I actually know someone that it happened the other way, where they actually left, and it was even loose. The kind of industry they went into was loosely competitive, and they had to go to court to get out of the non-compete because they were trying to enforce it. So
it definitely happens both ways, Damon. Yeah, and there's other reasons that people complain. People say, "Listen, I may be getting paid, but I'm losing opportunities." I just heard about a great position with a competing company, and it's an opening, and the opening's not going to last until my non-compete runs out 9 months.
Yeah.
I can't come back in, May of 2024 and say, "Okay, my non-compete's finished now. I'm ready to start work," and they've already hired someone. So,
yeah.
But it's a lot of employment law, like you've got different extremes, like you've got states that don't have really hardly do anything for paid leave or sick leave, and the workers suffer. You have states that then impose on companies very high demands, and then the smaller companies' profit margins suffer. I often wonder and talk to my clients, like, should there be almost like a sliding scale approach? Like say, Bill, if you're going to raise minimum wage, great. If you're going to have overtime, prevailing wage, terrific. But should there be some kind of sliding scale? So, now if you're, let's say, saying like a company has to have, 20 paid sick days and an extra higher minimum wage and all these other, things to take care of, should there then be consideration for companies that they can show economic hardship, right? Because not every business, as we said, is big business, right? Not every company. And those are the ones that get in the news. Look at Amazon. They're really treating their workers terribly. And Amazon can afford and should be paying a higher, So it's interesting. It's something I come across with my clients. How do I help them, to follow the law and protect the bottom line? And I've tried to really focus on that, with litigation defense, with drafting employment contracts, with, drafting like shareholder agreements. And how do I help my clients follow the law without going broke in doing so? And that's really the challenge that we face.
I love that. How do I help my clients follow the law without going broke? That's
like a catchphrase or a slogan or something on my website, because it's really something. Yeah.
Well, man, Eric, it is always great to catch up with you, because you're in this all the time and you stay so current with it. And you've also, and I don't want to get out of here without talking about it, you're the host of Employment Law Today. You're going to be coming back out you're taking a hiatus for the summer. You've got a lot of things going on, family, business, other stuff, but you're going to come back later this fall with it. What are you excited for coming into the future? Between that, you're getting things going. What's happening?
Yeah, sure. Well, on the personal front, my son is turning 4 in August. It's amazing. Yes. I can't believe he's getting so big already. And we've got a vacation coming up. My wife and I and son, 2-week vacation. And then we bought a new house. So we're looking to move into that, nice beautiful space, and it's been, I told you earlier before we started, a roller coaster of just, the seller's market.
Yes.
Also looking forward to, some new client matters. I've got some litigation, some employment litigation defense. I've got a commercial litigation case where the judge should be deciding on my motion to dismiss, hopefully grants it. And just, a lot of like summer things to do. I did hope for a little more downtime this summer because every summer flies by. And I get to the beach 3 times. I said, I'm going to the beach next summer. But then now with the house and the moving and, all blessings, all gifts, I'm grateful for all of it.
Yeah.
No complaints, but I'm looking forward to the new work, what the new, year holds, and just time with my family on vacation and just all that good stuff. How about you? Any stuff you're looking forward to as the summer goes, as the year goes on? We roll into the second.
I just take every day, at this time of year in the Northwest, it doesn't get too hot. It doesn't rain. Today we're at about 74 degrees and the sun is blaring and it's just bright blue sky. So I just cherish the summer days and plenty of time with family and friends. And it's just been a great summer so far. And the year is shaping up nicely. So, but Eric, there's one question. I mean, we're right at time. I want to ask you one question quickly though, before we jump off. What is the thing that you're looking at now as the next future concern for businesses in employment law?
In employment law, right. And, I really think the non-compete issue is going to become the really continue to be the
big one.
Right. People do business. And I think, that as more and more companies become remote, we're going to see more issues of, which state's laws govern for like discrimination suits and, for issues like that come up when you have traveling employees, who might live in multiple states, they might reside, they might be bi-coastal. They might say, I live in New York. I'm really seeing like the remote hybrid workforce as a change in the future in employment law. It's just going to change the whole landscape. Employers have to know all the laws now from various states. Employee handbooks are now becoming like this, like a Bible, really thick. That's what I think is the big, issue. It's the hybrid workforce.
Yeah. There we go. Well, thanks so much. I mean, we were talking about employment law challenges today and growing businesses with Eric Sarver, Sarver Law Firm out of New York. Eric, thanks so much for being here. But first of all, how can people get a hold of you? If they want to talk to you, is it LinkedIn? Where's the best place to get a hold of you?
Yeah, great question, David. I'd say 3 places, right? I'm very, 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 very into LinkedIn. I'm very big on it. I'm posting there a lot. So certainly LinkedIn, you can just type in my name, www.ericsarver.com, ERICSARVER.com. That's my LinkedIn profile. For my website, you can also catch me at www.sarver, SARVER-law.com. And then the best way to reach me really is just, give me a call. My direct line I like to use, just call me at 917-930-8684 or email me at ems@sarverlawfirm.com. And that's how you can reach me. Happy to answer your questions, have a brief free call, schedule a consult, go the distance, whatever your employment law issues and business law issues might be.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here today. Really appreciate it.
I really appreciate you and your show. Thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. I want to also thank Michelle. Thanks for Michelle for being here today. I know you were listening from the car. Anybody else that was listening and commenting, hey, thanks for being here. If you didn't go back to the beginning, if you didn't hear it all, go back to the beginning because Eric covered some really interesting things about salary transparency, paid and unpaid leave, workers' compensation in the home office. Lots of good stuff in here. So just go back and listen to that. Thanks so much. And we will be back again next week with another guest.